Okay, hi, Steven Schkolne. Thank you for, we were joking just before, so it's funny, it's a funny start. Yeah, thank you for for doing the interview with me, the raw interview by Nicola. Yeah, and we know each other for like 20 years. Yeah, and you're a unique person in a sense, like for example, not in a sense, but for example, you had a early PhD at Caltech, you're like a high-tech person, to put it in very colloquial terms, but you also were teaching at CalArt, so you're very artistic, you know. So how did that happen? How does the technologies go into teaching art?
I guess I've always been very interested in art and design and also technology. And so I think for me,
I'm
it's
just
always been,
laughing, sorry. It's just
yeah,
something funny. Yeah. The jokes,
yeah. I mean, my PhD was very artistic. I created the first virtual reality painting systems, so the focus of my PhD was how can we use this new technology, which was very, 20 years ago is very new to do things. I was actually trying to bring the spirit of figure drawing, like working with paint and things like that, to computers, and trying to sort of question the artificiality of how it sort of always felt very artificial to work with the computer as opposed to with your hands or with clay and with these more traditional media. So yeah, I think for me, it's always been pretty organic, but yeah, I kind of blend the two. And even today, I do a lot of very technical work, building web products, but also I've been doing a lot of writing, some kind of computer philosophy stuff about machine consciousness. And I'm also do, help companies with design and trying to make their software feel good and working on user experience problems and challenges like that. So yeah, and we know each other, of course, from the art world, where we were doing a bunch of early internet art as well. So I think for me, it's just my focus has always been around software and computers. I've just loved computers and doing things with them, and wanted to kind of know them in every way. And yeah, it happens to bring together a lot of different disciplines. It's curious though, when I was at Caltech, people would always say, "Oh, you're the art guy," and then I would hang out with my artist friends, and then I always say, "Oh, you're the tech guy." So people never quite know where to put me. Yeah.
Yeah, that's fun. But sorry, I don't know what's funny, because I'm looking at this list that I made to ask you, and I just want to ask you, like a very important, why isn't speed cabling at Olympics? Because I just checked your Wikipedia. It says you're the inventor of speed cabling. I didn't know that. I just figured that out
Oh,
like 10
you don't know
minutes
about
ago.
speed cabling?
No, I don't know about speed cabling. Yeah, what is that? Yeah.
So speed cabling is a competitive sport around the untangling wires. So as you know, we're working with a lot of technology. Even today, there are a lot of wires we need. And like right now, I have a tangle of wires, and we both actually got together through this guy Miltos Manetas. He used to paint wires. And
yeah, I was thinking about him as well.
yeah,
Just sorry, an interruption. I did an interview with him, and the interview is so crazy that his own interview I didn't publish, and I'm seriously considering using it as blackmail against him. Like he's like I just asked one question, and it was like 1 hour, like into deep mind, black something, and it's like,
yeah. Well,
and you
Miltos,
just touch it like ding.
I mean, one thing you have to love about Miltos is he's a very honest person and direct person and a very real person. So you got a big dose of that. Yeah, but the thing with speed cabling, it's one of those things. So I've noticed I started to get pretty good at untangling wires because I dealt with it a lot. And I was talking to my friend Mark Allen, and at the time he was running this space called a Machine Project in LA, and it was like an experimental arts space that had a lot of people from CalArts there. And they just did things that were not necessarily mainstream gallery things. And I mentioned this to him, and he really liked the idea. So we're like, let's have this event. And we figured out all the rules, and we codified it. The biggest challenge was, how do you fairly tangle the wires? So you need to tangle wires in a way so that it's unbiased. And we figured out the best way was to take a clothes dryer and to take the heating element out, and you could put the wires in. And so we set this up, and we had this event, And for whatever reason, it just went viral. It was big. We were in Boing Boing covered it, and Slashdot, a lot of the big tech media of the time covered it, and then the BBC picked it up, and then they did an article. And I was getting interviews, from all over the world. People were calling me and wanting to do interviews, and there are people in Japan.
But you're joking. Are you serious?
No, look it up. Yeah, this is dead serious. This is my.
I just saw that on your Wikipedia page. I never heard of.
Yeah. It's a funny thing. It was definitely a 15 minutes of fame, right? Because I got all this press for it, and I thought to myself, wow, do I want to do this? I would have to do with my life, focus and make it kind of a nerd Olympics. And I thought about it. I was like,
Nerd Olympics.
Nerd Olympics, yeah. I wasn't, I liked the 15 minutes of fame, and I kind of left it be the 15 minutes. And, but I put it in my bio, and it's the kind of thing that people still smile at, and you can find the video on YouTube and things like that. So yeah. And there are some people there and did speed cabling competitions, like inspired by this one. But yeah.
Yeah. Well, I just want to ask you now here in front of the entire world audience of like my mom and I don't think my kids, I don't think my kids watch this far, but I would like to license. What?
Bill and Ted, have you seen Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure? They were just nobodies, and
like ages ago.
Yeah. Nicola, you never know. In 50 years, people could
anyway,
on the word here.
Yeah. So anyway, I at this point in time and space, I would like to request formally from you the license of your speed cabling life story to make it into screenplay and to make it into a Hollywood super mega blockbuster. I think this is the making of I can just see speed cabling. I'm going to immediately name it 1 because I know there's going to be like 2 and 3 and 4. I just see this as all my life I wanted to be in Hollywood, and I'm thinking what should I do? Should I be an actor, a film director, a screenwriter? And I think this is it. I think the God, I don't believe in God, but I think God spoke to me at this moment and said, this is your opportunity, Nico. This is a story you've been waiting all your life. It's Steven Schkolne's story of speed cabling. That's it.
Yeah, I can't.
So do I have a yes or no?
I can't give you the rights for free like this. We can work out some kind of percentage deal. But I tell you, if you want to be in Hollywood, being a screenwriter is you can sit in your bedroom, you can write your screenplays, and you can really do it. It's the easiest thing to do in terms of being in Hollywood, because it doesn't require.
I know everything, and I know everything, and I know everything, and I know everybody. I just needed the speed cabling story of Steven Schkolne. That's okay,
well, we can figure out a percentage. I'm not just gonna, and I need a cut, and I'd actually expect a little bit on the back end as well. Yeah.
I'll give you 110% of everything that I make.
Yeah, I can't do a verbal agreement on this one. Sorry. Yeah, we can maybe work on something and write. Have my counsel review. Yeah.
Okay. Let's go back to serious stuff. Okay, and so it also says that you're an inventor. What did you invent?
Well, I started inventing things.
Besides speed cabling.
Yeah. I invented speed cabling. I invented VR painting. I invented this thing called spider mesh, which I used to make a lot of my art. For 3D Sunshine, which is a startup I did a few years back, invented a lot of different ways to interact with things, to build things in virtual reality. Recently, for this client, they have a very high-end hotel, invented this thermal massage technology for them, which basically uses imaging to do a new kind of massage to sort of see inside the body. So I'm not the kind of inventor who I don't patent things and license them, but I've invented some things in terms of technology. Usually it's about mixing together sensors and technology and algorithms in some kind of way to make something possible for people. Yeah, and I think that that kind of explains why I have this sort of art side as well as a tech side. Is I'm not the kind of tech guy who's just happy making processors faster or something like that. Like I actually started my education doing microprocessor design, and I was very good at it. And I just thought there's something missing there, just to make it faster, make it more powerful, without understanding how that connected to some human feelings in a kind of way. And so most of my inventions have sort of focused on that and bridging the gap between technology and feelings, and sort of giving people different feelings or possibilities in a way, a different kind of experience with the technology.
Yeah. Well, you know, the problem I have, you know, I have often been criticized by my colleagues, by people that work with me, that I have kind of like a negative view on what they call a programmer or a developer, you know. And, you know, I don't think it's people being this. I see that as an activity. I'm negative about the activity. And the way I define it is that it's kind of, it's too narrow. It's telling people to be too narrow, kind of like just do this. And I see it as a product of kind of the way companies are organized. They want people to be narrow and not ask too many questions and just focus. And I don't like this term. You know, I have to hire people like that. You know, I work with people who are, you know, culturally educated. You know, they're programmed to believe that this is a proper term. But I see them more as I would like them to be more. I know they're more, you know, but they're put into this label. So in your opinion, you know, what's missing? What's missing in the term programmer, developer, software engineer? You know, what can be? How can they be more?
Yeah, I mean, it's a great topic. I'm glad you bring it up. And I think the term is fine. I mean, I think like other terms, people start to change it. You know, are you a developer? Are you an engineer? Are you a coder? You know, it's a term is a term, but I think in terms of the role, I've seen this attitude where people think, oh, I'm just going to give the programmer orders and they'll just follow them. In my experience, I've worked with developers like that. So, and I've seen it all ways. I've hired developers, I've been managing developers, I've been a developer for I've been on all sides of this. And I think in terms of hiring developers, if you have to give the developer orders, it's sort of a lost game. The best developers that you can work with, in terms of there's this sort of the product and business requirements and needs, they get a sort of half finished thing, and they really close the gaps. You know, they kind of figure it out, and they're like, you know, for example, trying to say, oh, exactly when do you need to make the button highlight? You know, when do you change the focus? When does the screen scroll? How wide is it? Like all these details of the interface. I love working with developers, and I've worked with plenty of them, where you kind of don't need to worry about those little details, even of design. A designer can just say, here's basically how it looks like, and they will make it all work. And then I've worked with another kind of developer where, you know, they don't even match the pixels on the design, and you're like, why is this ugly? Why is this blue? It should have been black. And they don't even see it or realize it, and you feel this need to micromanage them. And I just think of that as a bad developer. So I don't really see the role of, I think there's a certain mindset where you see the role of the developer to follow orders. And I think if you're in that mindset, then you're not having it's just not a good scene. There's another way the developer—
Engineers in general, what I mean is engineers in general, there are these people who are waiting to be told what to do, but they have, you know, that's not possible. I think it's impossible to tell another person what to do and they're going to do it. I have never seen this in my life. It is absolutely impossible. I have seen people who believe in that and they keep trying to do it, and it is impossible. So that's why I'm always thinking that it's always a collaboration and it's a chaos, you know. I mean, obviously there is documentation in the process, but that's a formal part of 20%. You know, there is so much done above that.
Yeah, I'm working on this one project, and I don't do any development at all. I don't even touch code. You know, I don't even give them insight. Or, you know, but the developers, some of the developers I work with are really great in that they surface all this stuff comes up. You know, like when you're engineering, when you're under the hood, there's all this stuff that comes up from really understanding the system and how it works. And there's this wonderful tension where they say, oh, let's do it this way. Let's do it that way. You know, it's my job is to figure out what the application is and how it works. But these developers are always pushing me. you know, and sort of fighting for it this way. And they have all these very strong opinions, and they have such a strong creative impact on the final product. And I would say that's the model for what a developer should be like, and how one should work with them, is they're fighting for the product. They have their own opinions. They're make it this way, make it that way. It's all informed by stuff that the rest of the team doesn't even have access to. And so I think that's how you really get to a healthy product.
Yeah. What I was thinking is that, you know, for me, like, for example, I love designing business cards, you know, all my life. I'm so happy. I don't know why. The first time I designed a business card, I'm always happy. I had a website even.
Yeah, I've used a few of your business cards. Yeah. I remember you made me one. It was like Dr. Steven Schkolne is a good friend of Mr. Nikola Tosic. Yeah,
I don't know that. Yeah, Rafael reminded me I made a big one for him, like this big.
Yeah.
So he was just like, ooh, cute. Yeah, so business cards are really a lot of fun because you have to do all these things for a company. You have to do titles and the slogan. I mean, everything's there. You know, the entire future of these people. You know,
the business card is also this kind of private world. Everyone looks at the logo or a poster, and then these worlds of design. Business card design, there aren't a lot of people who focus and elevate it to an art form. But when you have that moment with someone and you meet them and they hand you this thing that's like an art form, it's transformative. Yeah, but it's a private, it's a kind of private design. People don't put them on, you know, the public doesn't see it. It's a very intimate design object.
Yeah. Well, what I was aiming at is that I'm a designer. I do all kinds of design, and you know, but I'm just trying to go back to developers in a sense that they are creating code, they are developing code, just like I'm doing graphic design or some other kind of design. And that's one element of what I am. And I'm so much more than that, you know. And if someone would tell me, okay, you design business cards, so you're a business card designer, I love designing business cards, but I would be upset by that because it's kind of limiting everything that I do. I do another 100 things. I'm something more. So I'm just worried about this title of programmer developer. You know, I'm dreaming of the day when I can sit in my company because my clients and everybody around still believes, many employees believe in that. Like, I don't know how much that would affect if suddenly they have completely different titles, you know, like, you know, something more creative, you know, putting them in a different position, telling them, just like Miltos told us, I was just doing in other interviews, Miltos told us we're artists, you know, for me at least, you know, he told me I'm an artist, I became an artist. Something about this idea of giving everybody different titles so they become something more than just programmers, just more than developers, you know. So I'm just asking you because you're with one leg you're in this world, and it's like, you know, I think there is a certain kind of subtle limitation with these titles, with this entire organization and hierarchy with these kind of names, you know. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I mean, I think you can look at the titles and certainly you can change people's mindset with the title, but the reality is, like, software, you know, your software is an organism. It needs to grow, and the only way it can grow and develop is with a lot of human effort. And I think that's the real role of a great software. What I think is sort of distinguishes, you know, software engineering, or the deeper, more elevated, the most elevated form of the craft, and that's seeing this whole lifespan of the software and knowing where it needs to be and tending to it now, meeting its needs now and meeting its needs in the future. And it just tends to be a full-time job, and it tends to be a full-time job for a number of people. And it also, yeah, I just think that you can change the title, but are they not going to be spending most of their time, you know, you could call them like software zookeepers or something like that. And the reality is that they're still going to have to be very focused on that part of it. I actually think there's a healthy separation between the implementation and the design. Like for me, I guess sometimes I design and engineer a product, but most of the time I would rather either be designing it or engineering it, because as a designer, I'm like, oh, I want this and I want this and I want this and I want this and I want everything, right? And I need to forget about the implementation reality to get to the best design. When I'm thinking in engineering terms, if I'm engineering on a project and I'm also designing, I start to design in a little bit more based on what the engineering wants than on what the user wants. So I think it is a healthy thing in our ecosystem that we have the separation where someone doesn't even understand the pain. It's like, oh, I want to move the button over here. and they think, no, I just want the button here. And they don't have it in their head, oh, that'll be 5 days of work to move the button. So I think there is a healthy division of labor in the industry. So I think it's okay to have people focused a lot on the implementation, the internals of this organism. Maybe you just feel like the term developer is a bit pejorative, like it's a negative term or something like that, or it's something that people.
No, I'm making, in my mind, it's negative. Yeah.
Yeah.
Negative, because I would like, because
yeah.
You're looking at it as time, and I agree with you. But also in my work, I mean, if I would define my title by time, I would have a really stupid title. I'm defining my title by the highest decision that I'm making, or the biggest impact I have for customers and people around me, and I think that gives me responsibility. Even if that decision takes me 1 minute a month, and 99.9% of the time, I mean, developers are no different than designers or video makers and everything, and, for example, a film director is going to be, I don't know, screaming or something, fighting, but he's not called a fighter, he's called a film director, So, he's not being called an asshole at the film shoot.
Yeah.
So, I'm just thinking it's not about the time.
Yeah, I think it was Silicon. One of my first internships, I worked for this company, Silicon Graphics, which was this, they died.
Oh, yeah, I know.
The world leader in computer graphics at the time, and I believe their only job title was member of technical staff. And they just, they weren't a programmer, you weren't an engineer, and they decided, just, and it's not a very, it's almost like that's not the most important thing that you do. It's almost opposite to what you're saying, but they were just like, let's just do something very humble and very vague. You're a member of the technical staff, and like maybe you're doing testing one day, and maybe you're building a product the next, and so you're not going to be a test engineer or a software developer. They just let it be very vague and let people kind of float about. Yeah. I thought that was a nice approach, because it gets away from being precise at all and lets people find exactly, maybe their contribution 1 month is in one area and they float around. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it reminds me that back in those days, we were talking about 90s. Is that correct? Silicon Graphics?
Yeah. Like late 90s, yeah.
2000. Yeah. I mean, those companies were amazing. I remember I was super influenced. I don't know if you know the company called Canned Interactive. I think they were from LA. They were making all the websites for the movies. And I mean, companies back then were super crazy. They were having so much fun, so I think that was a little bit lost.
Yeah, I think Facebook
anyway,
engineering
so
levels, like in tier 5 or tier 4, some of them have these tiered systems and things, and yeah.
Well, the reason, it's funny you mentioned this, because I'm kind of guiding you towards the thing that is very much related to what you said that you're focused on now, which is artificial intelligence, And I'm just thinking that, that this division between, design, meaning you're making decisions what something will do, and then people who execute, and, one person can make decision what something does, and you have 10,000 people executing that, like in Facebook, like 100,000. And you have one person deciding. And if these people feel they have no say or responsibility in what they're building, I mean, that's a little bit, weird, in my opinion, where they're fragmented and organized.
Yeah, but that's not, so have you ever read this guy, he wrote about the auto industry. It was, I think, Peter Drucker was his name.
Yeah. The movie, on Netflix movie. Yeah. I love that movie.
So movie. Peter, he wrote a lot about, it was Drucker. We're just double checking this. He wrote about, he's famous for talking a lot about GM and like the GM management process in like the 60s and 70s. And around the 80s and 90s, he started to write about what it meant to be in an information technology world. And he had this insight, which was the command and control structure.
Sorry, you're talking about the management consultant.
He was a management writer. The Changing World.
Okay, that's another one.
Peter Drucker. Yeah, he wrote these in the 50s and 60s. In the 50s and 60s, he was saying, we had these command and control structures that came from the military. And before 1900, the only organizations that had hundreds of thousands of people, or before 1800, were military organizations. In the industrial age, say the 1850s to 1870s, we start to make these factories where we need to organize these groups of people with a tightness that was never needed on, say, a farm. Farms never got that big, right? And so what do people start using? They start using these military systems that have been designed where you have a captain and a pyramid and people report upwards. And General Motors was started with that. And they actually, he writes about the fluidity of GM and like some of the things they did to make it like these hybrid organizations. But fast forwarding, when it gets to information technology, he says these command and control structures don't make sense anymore. And what differentiates information work is that the people at the bottom of the pyramid know more, they're experts. They know more about what's going on than the people controlling them. And so they can't actually be effectively controlled by a chain of command because there's a lot of information and knowledge with what they do that the chain of command doesn't just know. And so I think that's true with Facebook. They're like, oh, make a Quest headset, right? Somewhere down at the bottom of the control hierarchy is a person who's engineering the strap that makes it go on, right? And all the person at the top says, oh, make it good. But what makes it good? How is it good? There's a whole team designing the physical casing of that just understands it far better than anyone could manage them, right? And so when you get to information work, he argues, and I think it's true, you need to have people empowered at every level of the organization. And the people who are bosses can't feel like they simply don't know more than the people that they're managing. And so you need a sort of different attitude that isn't one of command and control, that isn't this military attitude, which is more, sometimes the person you're managing gets paid more than you. And that's a reality we see.
Yeah. But it's not about the money, and it's not about command, the line of command, the hierarchy. For me, it's more that the fragmentation of work, meaning that, the person at such a large organization, the programmer, is culturally, kind of shaped to think that my job is to make the best code, to make it most efficient, without thinking about the relation. Meaning you have enormous width. There is like one of you in 100 million, software engineers, because you're also an artist. That's why I started with this, and you're, that you have this ability to understand more. But people are, always being told that they are, most of the people are being told you're in this place. This is your place. So even if they're best in this place, they haven't learned that they can be much bigger than that. And I see there is a lot of danger in that, as there are more and more operational people that are very good at being operational. And as technology is taking more, is having more impact, like AI and stuff like that, I see that is a little bit, a little bit weird, because there is in the last year, there's so many these problems with AI in banks and stuff, and that where there is a lot of bias, and I still think there is an enormous amount of bias because all the design decisions, are coming from few people. And their bias is coming into that. Even not deliberately, they're not saying, yeah, let's discriminate against this and that. They are just not thinking about that. Because all the other thousands of people working on the software below, they never question, they never ask, they never think about that. They don't have a position in their mind that they should do that. Yeah. Sorry, I'm maybe ranting a little bit, but
yeah,
you get my point,
Yeah, the AI bias questions, I think you also have to compare them to human bias. So AI's, for example, these like levels, like, there's AI that'll racially discriminate, right? And that's a horrible thing, and it making headlines that it will discriminate. But how is that compared to humans? Humans racially discriminate. I would wager worse, than AI. It's like, it's a rare thing to see in AI, where it's a common thing to see in humans. You could look at self-driving cars. A self-driving car gets in an accident, everyone freaks out. But there are, thousands of accidents, they happen all the time with humans driving. And so we have to be careful not to have, I don't like when people have this perfect standard for AI. And then this, realizing how, the competition is actually human ability. The other thing about AI is that it actually makes it, I wrote this article a few years back. It wasn't a very popular article. I don't think it's a very popular perspective, but it was at the time, there was this Google memo coming up about discrimination, and there was this big to-do where this person was sort of complaining about their HR policies. Anyway, I forget the details of that story.
Something political, yeah.
Yeah, there's some right-wing, left-wing stuff. And I was like, I realized, we have the technology to completely, like, I could work with someone today and not even know what their gender was, or what their color of their skin, or their national background, or any of these criteria. We could actually use technology. We could use chat, text chat. You know, we could have virtual avatars. You know, we could do just a skin. Like we could all be green aliens or video game characters, like you can in an application like VR chat and virtual reality, or many of these Snapchat filters. We have a lot of technological capabilities to remove bias from humans. The ability for humans to be biased at all, because if I don't see your skin color or don't know your gender, or you can choose whatever gender or skin color you want, like in World of Warcraft, like to put it simply, in World of Warcraft, there's no basis on the bias based on people's biological attributes. Anyone can be whatever race they want. So yeah. That's your question, but I don't know. There's maybe some interesting things to talk about regarding bias.
Yeah. Well, I mean, the first thing you said is that. Sorry, suddenly I forgot what is the first thing you said. What was the first?
I was talking about.
I had an argument.
Human AI will be biased, but
I get it now. So I disagree with. I mean, I've met racists and. But the racist people, I mean, we're talking about bias against race, against all kinds of bias, nationalism. That still doesn't happen in every single case, because if it's in the software, it's going to happen in almost every single case. And these crazy people that have this prejudice, I mean, it's also very questionable in my mind how much of it is real, because I mean, I've saw some crazy racist people. Yeah, for sure there is extreme racism and other types of chauvinism and prejudice and stuff like that, but that's not going to happen. Like, you're not going to go to the bank today and they say, okay, well, you're a woman, you don't get that. That was the case with the new Apple Card, for example. That guy from Basecamp was complaining, and that was really extreme. So I mean, it goes back to the point again. I don't know how much errors there are. But, I mean, I'm from Serbia, and I think 10 years after my country changed the name, I was still going to main websites and I couldn't buy something because you had like outdated the country list. Because not a single developer, I mean, that's a simple example. We don't need to talk about AI. I was not able to do like a bunch of stuff because simply nobody updated the country list. There is no programmer who's going to think about that. And you said it's great if they fill in the gaps. But I'm asking you, some, the top 1%, 2%. And the others could do that as well, but they're not educated to do that. They're educated to be, to not do that, because of the division of labor or whatever. And I think that's stopping enormous amount of innovation and creativity. That's really really blocking it, because they're all becoming kind of operational. They're not thinking beyond, they're not taking the responsibility for it.
Yeah, in my experience, I think the number of developers who take agency is a lot higher than 1 or 2%. I think that's the kind
in your environment. In my environment is like super high. In my environment is super high, but that's our environment, because we are boutique, small, independent. We choose projects. We are entrepreneurs. We design our own products. We're very selective. But think about how many programmers are there in the world. Like 100 million, maybe. How many?
It depends. Do you count JavaScript programmers? Every JavaScript programmer?
Okay, now everything. Okay, but for example, but they participate. Yeah. So let's say there is 100 million. It's going to be 200 million, 500 million. There's going to be more and more. Because, and but how many designers are there? The number of designers proportional to the number of developers is drastically, decreasing. There are less people making decisions and creating innovation, and there are more people doing what these people want. Just think about like 20 years from now, where you have 10,000 people coming up with innovation and ideas, and you have 100, 200 million doing what these people design. And that's not a healthy thing. In my mind, there should be increase of design people who are doing design should be increased. So that's what I'm worried about, that decentralization of decision making,
Yeah.
Just putting it out there. I mean, I don't know, maybe I'm wrong, but for sure in our environments, I mean, almost every developer I know, even the people that are working with me, they become creative, hopefully, and they have space.
Yeah. Like I've also been involved with, what you could call shit companies, or companies that don't have their shit together too much. It's like, I think about these numbers, and it's like, a lot of, the teams I built, and I will only work with these kinds of programmers, teams I've been part of. And then I look at the big companies like the Facebooks and the Microsofts, and by and large, they tend to have pretty good developers and give a lot of independence. But then I think of some of these shit organizations that aren't so good. And what I see is sometimes the developers still make decisions there, in part because their management, like their design management, isn't good enough. And the product management team is also not very good at these organizations. And so I think if you see a scenario with a really good product team who gives these great orders, and engineering team just kind of follows and they aren't that good, I think that's not that common. You often see something where it's like, the product team isn't that good either. And so the engineering team actually does make a lot of decisions almost by default, because there's this vacuum that they fill. But maybe they're not making great decisions, and so you end up using the product, and you're like, wow, this thing doesn't feel that great. And but there, in terms of the agency, I think there's agency on both sides.
Well, just to give you an example, like a lot of issues came from management in the 70s, mostly 80s, because the managers were really poorly educated. I mean, that's before the developers. Now developers, software engineers, people making software are gaining more. We have some guy like Elon Musk, who is a software guy making cars and spaceships. They're going into physical things, for example, the most typical example. So, and before that, in the 80s, that was the management, people making decisions, creating things. They were deciding on the soda or the new real estate project or whatever. And they were seriously poorly educated. I don't think they read much, or even if they read, if they had any understanding or they had any debate or anything like that. I mean, and here we have there are a lot of issues because of all of that enormous growth that was going on the wave of really poor education, of people not understanding what's going on. And now we have another wave and another army of people that are going headstrong. What does Zuckerberg say, Mark say, let's break it or something, let's move and break stuff, So, and again, move fast and break stuff. So, and again, I don't feel like they have enough time. They're going into it very young to do stuff, like if you want to be an artist, you're a young artist until you're 35. For a programmer, there is like, hey, you need, by 35, you need to retire, need to make like $1 million to retire. I mean, military, you mentioned military is the only organization that wants people young because they're very malleable, you can influence them very easily. So, and I always remember my father coming to my first company where I worked with 100, mostly programmers, says, and I was thinking he's going to be super impressed. He's like, so why are all these people being here kind of exploited? It looks strange. Why are all the young people here, For him, that was strange, that there is like all these young people listening to others. So I'm just like worried with this idea of lack of education, lack of inspiration, meaning the opposite of you. You obviously you have critical thinking, you have a wider view, and you're talking about AI and consciousness. I watched your videos, and it's increasing. I mean, my kids are, I'm depending on software nonstop on everything. Mm-hmm. And, all my life I've been feeling generally, I have to use it, but it's not as good as it could. It's not as innovative as it could. It's not as creative as it could. There is a lack of what you just said in the start. You have that human part, and majority of people don't have it, but they're making all this stuff. I mean, it's not like I can go to another operating system, get another phone, get another Zoom. I mean, for artists, you agree, Zoom is like unbelievably dry. It's so boring. It's so primitive. And it's like, what else do we use? That's it. So, I'm just worried about this thing, and especially when AI comes. I mean, it's here, Google Maps and all that stuff, but it's more and more, it's more and more of this stuff. And it's like, it's so, in many ways, it's so disappointing compared to what you have in your mind and what I have in my mind. And it's not up to me. I don't want to be the boss telling people what to do. I want millions of those people who are making those things to have a spark, a bit more of a spark and a bit more say in that thing, Does that make sense, what I'm saying?
Yeah. I think it ends up being very difficult. A lot
Do you
of
think that's a problem? Do you think that's a problem or not? Is there a problem?
The problem, that there isn't enough innovation or great software going
No,
on?
that
Or
people making that
people
change, building the world now, just like the 80s, different
the
set
people
of
are
people
dull,
that they are making
or
poor decisions, that they're not properly educated to make high quality decisions, that they're making very quick, and can that be tweaked? Can that be improved? Because just to explain,
yeah,
I mean, just to add one more thing, sorry, there is this belief that, how do you call it, laissez-faire, like let's let the world go its course, let people satisfy their own deep needs, and then eventually through this chaos of free market and everything is going to be perfect. And then there is this idea where, there needs to be some control. I mean, there needs to be, like, you need to push it. You need to give a grant. You need to kind of design the educational thing. I mean, someone needs to make a decision and give it a direction. I mean, it's not, so I'm either for, I think some things need to be controlled and some not. And I'm talking here about the control of how programmers are being educated and positioned so we can get better stuff in the future, mainly AI, which is like, is going to be, I mean, Google Maps already just took everything. I mean, as an example of AI.
mm-hmm.
Does that am I making sense?
Yeah, I still trying to isolate the yes or no, exact yes or no question that you want me to answer. Could you put it in binary terms? Like, what is this, like in one sentence?
Yeah, is the programmer, is the education of software engineers and programmers good or bad?
Okay.
Do you think it needs more of what you are?
Well, I thank you for the compliment. I would say, in terms of engineering education, there are different ways that people get into the engineering and get into the craft of doing it. And there are these cookie cutter ways of solving problems. So there's various toolkits, and there are a lot of people who learn to program where it's like, do things in this way. And that's why you'll notice like a lot of websites look the same. And it's actually very similar to design. I've known people who work in design who are like, oh, I can make it look a certain way. I know a certain look. And then they're the kinds of designers who can create a new aesthetic, who understand the deeper fundamental principles. And so in terms of programming education, there are sort of two kinds of education that take place. There's the education that I had, where you learn a bunch of math and the fundamentals of algorithms, the fundamentals of programming languages, and why all these things were done, and the different things that were tried that failed, and you get a deeper understanding of how systems are built and how all these things work. And then there's and that's like a more typical university. I mean, I have a PhD, right? So it's like a lot of many years. And then there's another approach where it's like, oh, you want to build certain kinds of websites, and that's why I mentioned JavaScript. PHP used to be the language that had a lot of people who sort of didn't know much about what they were doing, but could sort of stick stuff together and make basic websites and things like that. And you see a lot of that in web development, where you learn the certain ways and you can go out and sort of do a job, and everything's very codified. And so people don't understand how to build a fuller system. The thing is that that's a much shorter education. It allows people to get into the workforce more quickly. They don't have the fundamental skills to innovate because they took the sort of shorter educational path. And yeah, you could argue that is making products worse. At the same time, there's so many people making products, and I actually don't want people to to take from this that I don't respect self-taught programmers or people who went along that path, because in my experience in the field, there's still I'd say half of the great programmers sort of went this way and didn't do the university stuff that I've personally known. So there are definitely people who take this path, and usually it's because over 5 to 7 years of working, they figure it all out themselves, and they have that education, right? But it's still, there are a lot of people who don't have the deeper knowledge of the fundamentals, and for that reason, they don't necessarily innovate on the deeper levels. So I think there is a lot of work that could be done in programming education. And I think for me, the one thing that I don't like to hear is when people say, oh, you don't need to learn all the math stuff. You don't need to learn all the theory stuff. It's fine if you don't have to go to some brand name university to learn it. But I think it's very important if you want to work with software that you understand these things. And I know many self-taught programmers who figured it out themselves with the internet, and that's great, But yeah. But I think this idea that you can bypass it or that you don't need this kind of stuff is a bit damaging. But then in terms of the products we have, I mean, the world has always been filled with mediocrity and poor design and poor craftsmanship. And I wouldn't say that I think it's getting worse. I think things in general seem to me to be getting better. People are getting more and more capable. The tools we use to build software are getting a lot richer, and you know, the web, I think it really in these past few years has actually gotten to be a reasonable environment for making things. It's lagged behind desktop application development for so long, just in terms of, you know, just the basics of controlling the experience. So I think I'm optimistic. I think we're in a good spot. I think the questions for AI though are like, you know, what happens when development itself gets more automated? There's still very little automation in the world of development, and it's kind of really a sticking point for automation. So yeah.
But that's very good that you said that. And how much more time do you have? Are you in a rush?
Oh, we can go like another maybe 20 minutes, then I have to go. Yeah.
Okay, cool. So that's very good that you said automation. So, I mean, the more automation you have, you're released from the operational tasks. And then obviously you have to think about something else. You know, you have to make different kind of decisions because you're not burdened by this, you know, heaviness of, you know, of manually doing it, you know. So I think that's going to happen, you know, quickly, maybe in the next 2 decades, I think, if you agree. So yeah. I'm just worried with, you know, and just for the record, I was not referring to different kinds of levels of developers, because I think I was talking actually the difference between you and the MIT Caltech, another person who maybe went and is working from military and is doing something boring. So, I mean, not about the hierarchy like this, but about the difference, because you have the width and the social understanding, you know?
Yeah. I think
maybe there is a JavaScript. Yeah, there is a JavaScript programmer who does learn JavaScript 3 weeks ago and has that width. And there is like an MIT kind of like a guy inventing new AI.
I went to school with a bunch of people, you know, who aren't interested in art and design and don't have the kind of breadth that I do. And what they end up doing is they make very, very deep contributions. And it's just a classic trade-off, breadth versus depth. Like a friend I went to undergrad with at Carnegie Mellon ended up doing a lot of innovative stuff with asynchronous VLSI and like certain different ways to make FPGAs compute things. And it's super deep, it's super heavy, it's very, very nuanced. It creates this extreme power in the world. But in terms of how that affects someone's experience, how that affects the human experience, it's just a source of power that can be channeled. And so I think that there's no way, like I'm capable of doing those things, but I would have to focus on and really get deep for a number of years to make those kinds of contributions. My contributions are more about the human aspect and sort of bridging the human with the technical. Yeah.
Well, you're making, you invented a new form of massage, and you didn't build a drone, you know, seeking software.
Yeah, I'm more of a tech synthesis kind of person. Like I made some algorithms when I was in school, but I'm not making new algorithms, right? I'm not coming up with things, you know, new ways to render hair or things like that. Like some of my colleagues in the past have ended up doing. So I just think you have choices in life between this sort of a breadth and depth. And for whatever, for better or worse, I'm a pretty broad person. I have a lot of interests. I think it ultimately comes to, and I guess maybe getting to consciousness. You know, at the end of the day, you know, what is it that why do we make our decisions? Maybe this is more the sort of a free will question rather than a consciousness question. And it comes down to free will. It's like, so we have these things automating everything for us. Well, what else are we going to do? Right? What do we want to do? Like, what do we want to get out of this world? What are our values? The automation just frees up those kinds of questions, right? So yeah, I think it's really about like trade-offs in life. And I think both paths are really good. And I think the world needs people who are more deeply specialized very badly. I think we very, very badly need people who are siloed in and zoomed in on one thing for 10 or 20 years. And
No, that's fine.
Yeah.
That's fine.
My role is
That's
more to
not,
like integrate
that's
different
not an
things.
issue.
I'm more of a multidisciplinary person, and in terms of my free will and my what I, you know, what I think of myself and what that thing tells me that I want to do, and how it guides my choices and my decisions, it's satisfied by the breath. Yeah. My physics teacher, I remember in high school, once said to me, it was like, I was taking 10 classes, you're supposed to take 6, I was taking 10, I was doing all this stuff, and I was getting like like a B plus or an A minus. I was, right on that borderline in the physics. And he was like, if you stop doing all this other stuff, you could be a really great physicist. And, even from a pretty young age, I was drawn to the diversity and to be a little more multidisciplinary. And I think there are people that are drawn either way, and that's just kind of our genetic lot. And I think it's good for the species. So.
Yeah, okay, anyway, that's a huge subject, how much people should think about different things, how much they should be. Again, it's not against specialization. I think I agree with you. If you want technological progress, I'm a specialist, I'm an extreme specialist, I'm working on a single project for myself. You cannot get more special than building exactly what's in your mind. That's the only thing.
Yeah, but I think ultimately we get into meaning of life questions. I think you can look at it from an individual perspective. It's like, what is your meaning? What do you want to do? What kind of role? Like, are you happy being focused? And a lot of people are happy, this sort of single track engineer, I only do this, I don't do that. I think it works for a lot.
It's not a matter of specialization. It's just maybe I need to, I'm thinking when I'm talking to you, because sometimes I feel intuitively there is a risk somewhere. And, my essential idea is that how can there be more of you? But I cannot describe what you are because I just know you good, something else bad. How can there be more of you? Because the way I see that you're creating, because these interviews are about innovation and creativity, and you're creating and you're innovative and you're directly affecting customers with your power. And I'm not saying people should stop being specialized or this or that, how they should. I'm just saying how can they be aware more of that and participate more of that, because I just don't think it's good, because I calculated that there is I just think there is an enormous amount. I spoke to, you can see other interviews, and a lot of people agree that, people are not unleashing, people that work in companies that are making products, they're not unleashing their creativity. That's not only bad for us as customers, it's bad for them, it's bad for companies. I get your angle. For some reason, they're locked.
Let me tell you.
So that's what I'm talking about.
Yeah. And I actually watch a lot of your content, and I understand where you're coming from this. And it's about here's what happens to me, right? Like, so I'm a consultant now, and I work for different clients, and so I can do different things. But people don't understand. Like, when I'm working as a designer, like I lead the design of the software suite, and I'm leading the decisions there. And when I start talking as an engineer, people are like, what are you doing? Right? I can never get anyone to have me be both an engineer and a designer. In any one project, they don't think that someone can be both. And I think it's because there rarely are people who do multiple things. And it's an experience. And I think certainly, when I'm doing one of the roles, my experience with other stuff helps me add value in different kinds of ways. But I don't think there's much of a place for being a multidisciplinary kind of person. And if you look at a company, let's say you're running a company like Facebook, and you're like, no, we have 1,000 engineers, or actually Google I have more experience with because they're very highly structured. Google had a lot of difficulty figuring out where to place me. I interviewed with them back when I came out of school, and they're like, there's a special group you can go join. They actually did have some special group that was in the redwoods that I could go do. I'm not sure what, they didn't give me any details. I let it end at that point. But they don't have a way of bringing someone into like a regular core team who's a little more multidisciplinary. The best you can get is being a manager. It's like, oh, then you're a manager. And it's like, well, yeah, the manager actually doesn't do any of the creative work. They're doing more of the management work. And I just, as organizations get big, they're like, yeah, we need to have it, you know, this year we need 10,000 hours worth of engineering on this, you know, why wouldn't we just fill that with a bunch of people? Why would we have people do half engineering and half design? Like, how do you hire people? Like put out a job ad for people who do half engineering and half design. Like, at the same time, some of the very best engineers I've worked with are really good designers, or vice versa. Like these people who can design and code products and bring them together in like a startup context are extremely powerful individuals. So we do see this actually in the startup context, this wearing multiple hats thing happens a lot. But as organizations scale, there's just a tendency towards increased specialization. So I'd say for you, your concerns in marketing innovation, how you can help companies, how you can bring the customer into the company and lead the innovation, I would say the challenge is for these bigger companies to maintain the multiple hattedness of a startup. And if you could have a company with 1,000 employees, it's like, yes, sure, yes, we have you know, 250 engineers, but of our 250 engineers, you know, half of them only do, you know, also do this other thing. And people whose time is split. It's like, yes, I'm a manager, but I spend 20 hours a week coding. Like, how many engineering managers do you know who spend 20 hours a week actually compiling the code? It's very rare. So I would say that it's more about trying to have this multiple hattedness of the startup in the larger company. I think that addresses exactly what you're
Yeah, that's a good point, you know, that they have to do different jobs. I mean, you're right about that. That makes a lot of sense, you know, that they have to do, as soon as they start doing a little bit, you know, like 10% of time doing something else, they start thinking about different problems. That creates creativity, because solving this problem, and then creativity is, you know,
and it's not enough to be involved, because sometimes it's like, oh, I'm an engineering manager, I don't code anymore, but I do code reviews, or I review the art, I look at other people's creative work and I give input. Or it's like, oh, I'm an engineer, but I'm in the design meetings, and then that, to me, that's insufficient. You actually have
to you're just learning to talk.
You have to face the blank canvas moment that we all know is creative.
You have to solve a problem.
To fill this void with the answer. Right. And so I think it's not enough to be involved in it. I think you have to, and maybe it's not every week. Maybe you do 3 months of engineering and 3 months of design. Maybe every manager needs to stop managing for a month. And like if their management system is very good, then a senior developer could step in and sort of run the team, and they spend a month implementing and then they switch back. Like these kinds of things.
That's a very good point. I like that. That's a very good point. I have to see what companies have done that, you know, that I probably some that are switching all the time. I mean, companies usually send employees to do charity work, which is, I don't know.
No, it has to be very, very real. It has to matter. It's not like, it's like, I can't go and like, you know, write code on the weekends. It has to be real production code for like a real shipping product, some real, you know, really solving the problem, really starting with nothing, and then presenting your solution to the team and seeing what they think, and experiencing that, you know, that base level of creativity that I think is the same across any, you know, whether you're a child with finger paints, you know, whether you're a Sunday painter as an adult, whether you're writing code within a company, whether you're trying to come up with a marketing plan as a CMO or something like that, you know, or coming up with a social media strategy, right? It's just like you have to face that aspect of the work. And I think if people, almost everyone in the industry only ever faces one kind of blank canvas. And so I think if people faced more different kinds of blank canvases, they would really understand, just more what it's about, and have more of a broad view on what their work is about. And probably we would get more, I'll leave it to you, you know, but that, to me, that seems like a path to the kind of innovation that you talk about a lot, which is customer oriented and bringing the customer's needs inside, and having everyone in the organization understand that kind of stuff.
That's awesome. I mean, I'm happy with you. You taught me something. We solved the problem. Maybe this is a solution. I'm thinking about it. I'm already imagining inviting some of the, you know, clients doing my work and me doing theirs, because that's what's missing. I try to fight to do their role, sometimes to switch the role, because I want it naturally. I want to do all the roles, even cleaning the office, you know, because I see a different perspective that way. But many people are very much stuck in their role. I think switching roles, I don't know how much a company can do that, but seriously switching roles, even for a
Here's the trade-off. The trade-off is, you switch the role, you're a lot worse at it, right? Because you're switching the role. there has to be another kind of benefit, a deeper benefit that comes from it, because you're just not going to be as fast. You have to ramp up on it.
I do a trick. I engage some of my clients who are decision makers. I engage them at a level which is very operational in different roles. And because it's kind of a trick, and then they learn a lot, and they're really great after that. They really understand much more. It's useless to explain, but as you said, I put them in a role, I give them a position in the approval process, or they have to do something, and I find something for them to do, even if it's small. But they're not just someone observing, but they're someone participating, especially somewhere in the process, not at the top. So that's a good thing. But making it systemic, systematic, that there is a switch of roles, that's a great idea. Steven, I would love to talk to you about the machine consciousness, because I watched you. I just spent like 2 hours today watching at your AI LA thing, but we don't have time. I think that's going to be, because I want to talk to you more about AI. I have a couple of notes in AI. So what I suggest is maybe we do another interview. If this one was not a horrible experience for you, we do another interview, like, I don't know, a month later.
I did want to talk about the AI and consciousness, and I mean, it's the thing I want to talk about the most.
And I was preparing for that, because, and also the element of creativity and the purpose of innovation in society, because my idea of AI, just to say, is that I consider the hard AI, is that when it starts communicating to other AIs, that's what I consider consciousness, because humans are a network, are a society. So I don't consider a single entity as a finished AI. For me, is how do they all interact with each other? But I would love to talk to you about that, but that's another 3-hour discussion, I think.
If we could do another one, if we could do another one, I'd be glad to do another one just focused on consciousness AI. I was trying to take some of the consciousness things, and I feel like this whole project has made me understand humans and about some of the things you talk about with brands and marketing, and how that relates to consciousness, and so I'd like to get into that some more. So why don't we pick it up at another time?
Yeah, we should do it, definitely. I'll email you. Thank you very much. Did you enjoy this? Was this good?
Oh yeah, it was a pleasure. I always enjoy spending time with you, Nicola. So awesome. It's been great.
So why do we spend like 3 hours every 2 years then?
I think it's been getting more frequent. It has been getting more frequent, and now we've already done an hour plus, and maybe we'll get 3 hours in within a 30-day span if we do this.
Cool.
Yeah.
Cool. Thank you for solving the problem. Talk to you later. Ciao.
Ciao, ciao.